podcast. Welcome to the next level. How's it going? I'm laughing right now because I've got a dear friend on the other end, and we've just been kibbutzing. I don't even know if that's a word. We're kibbutzing back and forth and cutting it up and having a great time. And I thought at some point we have to press record and let the listeners in on this conversation. I'm so honored to have my friend Ian Jeffries on the show here today, and we are going to be talking about speed. So Ian, welcome to the Coach Class Podcast.
Jace, thank you very much for inviting me on. It's a great pleasure. As you say, it's taken some time to get going, and it's hard to believe. I think the last time we met was, I think it was Chicago a couple of years ago.
Chicago.
Before all the madness ensued.
Would that have been 2019?
It must have been 18 or 19.
I don't know which one it was. I remember I did the last trip I did professionally. I did a comedy show in New York City, and basically on the flight home, everybody had masks on. And I was like, what's going on here? And then as soon as I got home, the Prime Minister of Canada said, if you're Canadian and you're overseas, it's time for you to come home. And we're like, what's going on? And that's when it hit Canada. So, yeah, and that was in March. So yeah, it must've been the summer before that. It's 2018.
I think it was the summer before.
Yeah. And then when I saw you at the, don't worry, folks, we are going to have content. But when I saw you at the Perform Better Summit, I said, dude, I got to get you on the podcast. You're like, yeah, for sure. Of course. Let's just set it up. And you're like, I'll go home and you'll do this. But I was thinking we'd see each other in person and do this.
Absolutely. Who knew? Who could have thought, isn't it?
But now we've got an awesome opportunity where, speaking of Perform Better, you and I are on a panel on speed and agility coming up for Perform Better. And the date on that, I can look it up if like a professional would.
It's early August.
So you don't know either. It is early August. It is August the 12th. August the 12th.
Do you know, I was going to say that, but I thought I'm safe and hedging my bets rather than giving a definitive date and being wrong again. So yeah, August the 12th sounds great.
You don't have to fly in for it. You've got the perfect setup right where you are there, but we're going to be mixing it up, talking speed and agility, and debating the subject. I think they're looking for some heat here. So I hope you're ready to bring it.
Well, I will do my very best, sir. But yeah, it's an interesting topic because it is one of those that is far, far less clear-cut than most of the others. I mean, in many instances, with strength and power and things like that, we're arguing around the edges. I think speed and agility is something that we still are yet to get our heads fully around, and there is far less agreement on so many things. So it's going to be an interesting time.
Yeah, and you know what? It's funny that you say that because when Chris said what topics would we like to speak on, first, second, and third, I put myself in for speed and agility first and foremost. And he came back to me, he goes, Jay, are you sure you want to be a part of this group? Like, I thought you'd be the power guy. And I'm like, the people in power have heard my philosophies. They know what I believe. They know, and I'm just going to be speaking to the same audience. I've got thoughts on speed and agility that are very different from the mainstream speed training. And I was like, I got to get these thoughts out there to that audience, because the whole idea of these debates is to bring different thoughts and kind of like get the juices flowing on people progressing, not just getting into like, oh, that's my guy, I believe in that guy, and then just, stick to your guns. So I can't wait to cut it up with you, my friend.
No, that's going to be great. And Perform Better, what a great organization to do it. Chris, who runs it, is probably one of the great people of our industry, a true gentleman, and it's a pleasure to work with that whole team. So I'm looking forward with the presenters that are on board, but also that team. They do a great job.
Well, think about what Chris Poirier has done for the industry of strength conditioning and fitness in general. Yes, great products, obviously, and put glass 15 in the referral box and you get 15% off. I've never said that before. So he created an really like a marketplace for the tools that the trainers use that were so hard to get before. Like, you can go to Walmart and buy a band, but if you want a band that doesn't break after like 10 uses, like you need like the real equipment. So there was nowhere to get this stuff, and like the ladders and all the cool stuff that you wanted to get. And they made sure they had every tool we needed right in one place. But that's part of it. But then when he started the educational side of it, that's when it changed everything. Because it's like, yes, you have a tool, but if you don't know how to use it, then you're the tool. So it's like, we got to teach people how to use it. And the workshops just exploded. And you know what it's like, man, there's nothing better than going to Perform Better Summit and seeing all those amazing young fitness enthusiasts all in one place, and all the great coaches.
Absolutely. And the beauty of it is it spans so many aspects, you know, from the personal trainers who are working with a whole range of clients through to the sports performance expert. And there's something in those events for absolutely everybody. And it's one of those, because of the diversity of people there, you can't fail to learn. And no. I always tell Chris this, my only frustration at those events is I can't get into every single session. He's got such a great lineup. That's normally true. With those, that if I choose one, it means I can't go to another session. So that I always feel I've learned a lot, but God, I could have learned even more. You know which makes me come back, I guess.
Yeah, it does. And you know what's interesting is that I sit in as many sessions as I possibly can, because I'm trying. Like I got my notebook out and I'm making notes. And it's weird how often somebody will say to me, "What are you doing in here, Jay? Like, you're one of the presenters. What are you doing in here?" I'm like, "I'm here to learn. Like, yeah, I'm also learning here." And they're like, "Really? I thought you'd already know all this stuff." And I was like, "You know what? This is like the most cutting edge stuff out there. Like, I've got specialists in areas that I don't do research in and I do not use." And that's where I find I get the best golden nuggets, is when you go to, let's say, I remember the first time I was introduced to breathing, you know, as a performance enhancer. And I was like, "What, breathing? That sounds like a boring one. I'm going to go over, yeah, you know what? Maybe I should check that out." And it changed my life from that point on. So, you know, you never know what you're going to learn, but if Chris has somebody there, and I just know there's some gold there.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
Now that's how I met you. And really, I want to kind of go down, give some content to our listeners. I want to warm up today by talking about a warm-up, which is what you're really, I think if we search you on YouTube, there's going to be more stuff on warm-ups than anything else. But do you want to talk about the ramp warm-up a little bit and just kind of give our listenership a little bit of insight into why you're so famous for warm-up?
Well, fame is probably an exaggeration, but you know, a lot of my stuff, and this is where I probably differ from a number of people in our industry, is that a lot of my ideas came through questions I was asking as an athlete. So I go absolutely way back with this stuff. And I even go back to a time where, believe it or not, we hardly ever warmed up before games. So I was playing at a decent level of rugby and we weren't doing warm-ups, and I'm thinking, this is rather strange, because at the same time I was trying to do a little bit of track in the summer, and they couldn't be so far separate. Right. Track was probably warming up for huge amount of time. Rugby was doing nothing. And because I was doing both, I was thinking, well, what was happening? So I can always remember going out and doing my own warm-ups. So people, he's a bit odd, that guy is. And they were probably right.
They were right about the oddness, but not because of the
they were most definitely right. But the interesting thing about the track warm-up was I was watching a lot of youngsters, especially coming into the track clubs, and they were doing warm-ups, and they seemed to take forever. And I would always look and think, how efficient is all of this? One, you need to do it. And secondly, how efficient with it. And then when I started coaching, and you always got a small window of opportunity.
Right.
So, but when I was working with a lot of coaches, the one thing they didn't want to do, the team coaches, was the warm-up. So I always saw that as an opportunity. Well, I can get dedicated time each session with the athletes. So what can I do? What's the best thing? And that is where I started to change my philosophy. We always looked in terms of warm-up as preparation for the upcoming session.
Right. Well, let me stop you there for 1 second, because when you said about efficiency, I think it's flipped now. And the warm-up is, like you said, become something ridiculous, almost like the track warm-up. I was brought in by a soccer association who said, can you take a look at what we're doing? From the grassroots all the way into their like elite clubs. And I looked at their warm-ups and I saw the better the club, the longer the warm-up. And I was like going, what's going on here? And so my first thing to say to them was warm up less. Like these players they were basically scrimmaging before the game. By the time they started the game, these guys were gassed. And I was just like, we're supposed to turn on the nervous system, warm up the body, get the body temperature up, get the heart and lungs moving, and get a little bit of agility and some spatial awareness. Now go play. So, but you found a way to ramp it up and do it efficiently.
I hope so. So I was never getting a huge amount of time. So it always had to be efficient within a 10, 15, 20-minute span. But then what really changed was working with the national rugby team. I would only see them once a week. So what can I do that will give them the longest or the most benefit in the long term? And I built warm-ups around teaching them how to move in the context of speed and agility. So from the moment they set on the pitch and they started to move, it was all teach them how to side shuffle, teach them how to cut, teach them how to backpedal, teach them how to run. When it got to, rather than static stretching, I thought, well, we always talk about Gray's functional movement screen.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing is, in a lot of instances, we'll screen players today, do absolutely nothing, screen them in 6 weeks, and guess what? They ain't got a lot better.
Yeah. How did that happen?
It's the clues are often in there. And so what I did then is I said, right, can I do squat patterns, lunge patterns, brace patterns, single leg patterns? And what I was finding is that they were moving better, but I was getting all of the mobilization that I would want for, instead of the static stretching. And then probably the biggest change was the dynamic flexibility, as it was called then, that they still weren't prepared for the session at the end of that. So I needed to increase the intensity. Now, what a huge opportunity to do quality speed work, quality agility work.
Yeah, I always say that and I designed a warm up specifically for this, but I always say the warm up is an assessment, and my assessment is also a warm up. So people say, how often do you assess your players? I'm like, every time they warm up, because I want to see how they move today, and make any kind of coaching cues that I need to. I do that in the warm up, so I can fix a side lunge. I can fix a single leg lateral bound. I can fix that stuff in the warm up and kind of give them a little bit of awareness. Like, does that feel a little different on the right side and the left side today? And they're like, yeah, my right side just doesn't work. Okay, just step off to the side here. Let's do a little glute activation. Let's bring it back. How does that feel now? Oh, it feels balanced now. Perfect. Now let's move on. So we do that. Now this is on a one-on-one scale, but as a team, you can also, you can do the same thing.
Absolutely. And you can structure teams so that you can put people with similar issues together.
Right.
So that you can be, your eyes can be more on them. Obviously you're looking at everybody, but you can focus that we're going to have issues here. This is where most of my corrective work will need to be done.
Yeah.
And so suddenly the warm-ups, and they were emerging over time, as you can imagine. They had this structure. We would work on movement skill just to get some warmth in. We would work on activation and mobilization, and then we would work on some intensity. And I just wrote that up for a UK SCA journal back in 2007. And it was an early version of the journal. We were looking for articles, and what can I write? oh, I'll do this. It may not, no, not many people would be interested in it, but
you never know.
And it just took off. It just
Yeah.
took off. And suddenly people would talk, oh, the ramp version and the ramp warm-up and all of that. And it took a life on its own. Yet it was just a logical system that emerged out of practice. It's ironically later on the theory came to justify the selections within it.
That's totally, whenever I come up with something that I'm playing around with, it's always play, see if it works for me, then validate. I never try to like find the science, validate, and then try it, because it's like, that's a long process to find out something didn't work.
Absolutely.
Question for you though, muscle activation. Now that's something that is like, it really takes a keen eye. You have your techniques, but to figure out what needs to be activated, what needs to be shut down. And doing that outside of a gym environment where you have, walls, you have, fitness equipment or some form of resistance to push against or activate against. How do you do that in an open field with like a team?
It's more difficult to do. And probably when I'm talking activation here, I'm not talking about the full-fledged work that you would do in the gym.
Right.
What I'm more talking about is slow, controlled movement through the range of motion, so that there's less ballistic elements. So as I'm moving through a lunge, for example, if I'm flexing the hip, I actively move it slowly through that range. And then again, by looking at the movement patterns, I can pretty much ensure that, we use terms switched on and things like that. I don't know if that's physiologically correct.
Right.
But do you know that we're learning to move, essentially? That's what I mean by the activation. Sometimes you see a lot of people doing dynamic things, but there's very little control. There's very little quality control, especially on the movement pattern itself. So the activation and the mobilization is very much enveloped in how those movements. So I would say it's probably very different to the specific parts that you would put in. But occasionally I would try to add those in where I see specific issues. Then we'll try to address those. But I'd need to know the athletes a little bit by then.
Right. Yeah. And is there, like, if you were to break down your warm up in general, does it start from more of a static, more like slow pace and then ramp up towards? Yeah.
So if you look at the raise part, the earlier part, it's very much just slow movement going through the types of movement patterns that you'd see in games. So we'll side shuffle, we'll back pedal, we'll backtrack, we'll jockey, we'll do controlled running, and so on, so that we're getting the temperature related elements of the warm-up going to come in the main session and will contribute. So when I'm looking at a good cut position, we'll just do a side shuffle and stick, and we'll nail that position. Now, one of the advantages with it is that we're getting a lot of skill development in without any increase in requirement of time. So that there's a logic to it, as I said, short-term, medium-term, long-term. So for example, if I want to introduce plyometric training in 6 weeks' time, we'll build a warm-up around hopping, skipping, landing drills, so that when they get to where they are able to do plyometrics, we're not starting from scratch. We're not saying, damn, I need to teach these now. We've already taught them in the warm-ups. They may not know that I've got 6 weeks worth of training planned out, but it's there that, if I'm going to do that there, I need to be able to teach these things here. So
you know what? One of my pet peeves, because we'll move on from the warm-up soon, but one of my biggest pet peeves is when I go to an event and I see people warming up and they're just going through the motions. Like they'll do like a little hamstring brush the ground stretch, or they'll do their ABCs or whatever, but they're just kind of like, and I get it. There's a level of trying to relax your nervous system, relax your brain, just like the psychology of performing, like their nerves are high. So they just want to kind of feel like they're just kind of skipping through it slowly, casually, and kind of bringing their anxieties down and all that kind of stuff. I get that. But then I'm like, well, then don't do that warm up. Like if we're going to do it, let's do it right.
Absolutely.
So that, I think that obviously it comes down to the coach, because the coach has to make it very clear. Like there's no, coffee breaks in the middle of our warm up. Like let's condense the warm up, get it intense. And then you guys can wander around and skip around, like whatever you want to do, but let's get the warm up like done and make it effective and make sure they're focused. What are your thoughts on that? And how do you work around that when you're working with maybe a team that's not yours, when you're just advising a team?
Absolutely. I think what you have to do is have a clear mind of what you want to achieve. I think all too often the exercise becomes the goal.
Yeah. And
it never is. The exercise that you choose is always, or should always be chosen to achieve a specific objective. So especially team sports as well, you will see a lot of people going through the motions. So you look at the quality of the movement pattern. And I think the key is to emphasize that every time you do a movement, it's a potential learning experience. Now that learning experience can be positive. You've practiced the movement, you've performed the movement very well. It can also be negative.
Right.
So every time we do a movement incorrectly, there's a danger of reinforcing a movement pattern that could come and bite us in the foot later on.
Okay, so let me just I'm going to give you a hypothetical situation. I'm going to put you on the spot, and I want to see if you can come up with an effective way to prepare this athlete to play. Okay. Let's just say hypothetically, you're in the Euro Cup and you're in the championship game. Okay.
Yeah.
And you want to put a player in who hasn't played the entire game and not in overtime, but you want to prepare him just so he can take one penalty shot. And that's all his job is to do, is just to take one penalty shot. That's all he's got to do.
I don't know what you've been watching then.
This is hypothetical.
It's hypothetical.
Hypothetical.
Strange where hypotheticals meet reality, isn't it?
Yeah.
That would be difficult. Because obviously the psychological elements of that are absolutely massive. I don't think that's going to be down necessarily to a physical process.
No. What's one of the best ways to warm up the psyche, like to bring the anxiety down in a situation like that? Let them run for like 10 minutes in the game, right? Let them have a kick. Let them have a kick around, sprint it off, get the anxiety up, get in the game so you feel like you're actually part of the team, and then go and execute. But to just throw somebody in like that is wow. But again, that's just a hypothetical question. It has nothing to do with reality. So, man, oh man, that was tough.
It was. But then again, if they score, the manager is a genius.
Yeah, true. That's true. That's true.
And I think this is something that we do. We always like the narrative, don't we?
Yes.
Where we love to tell a story. We see something happen and we like to associate all success or failure with that one thing that you did. Yeah. And nothing ever works like that. There are so many things that go in to explain anything.
Think about like if you watch golf, the guy misses the 3-foot putt to win, right? So he misses the putt, he loses. And everybody's like, oh my God, I can't believe he missed that putt. Oh no, like he played 3 days of golf before that, by the way. And there was a lot of shots where he had an opportunity to make something happen that he didn't. It's not that putt. That putt is one putt of all the rounds of golf that he's already played. So it's like the same thing. We like to focus on the one moment, but it's actually just one, hair compared to the rest of the,
exactly. And then you go back to that putt and people will look at the actions leading immediately up to that putt, believing that all the clues lie in that.
All the clues will be there.
All the clues. Oh gosh. As you said, they played 4 days of golf.
Now you said a word, genius, earlier. And as soon as you said genius, my brain just went, oh, I was thinking about a good friend of mine, a good friend of yours, someone who we both hold so dear. He's a mentor of mine. I call him the Yoda of strength conditioning, Liam Hennessy. let's have a little Liam Hennessy love fest here. He's been on the podcast, and I've been out to Setanta College. He had me do a Load Explode workshop at Setanta. 2 days. I brought my whole family out and stayed there and had dinner with him and his wife at his beautiful home. And man, oh man, he couldn't have a better host and a better guy than Liam Hennessy.
I couldn't agree more. He is a dear friend of mine for going back quite a long time. And what has been fantastic this year is he's now a work colleague of mine. I've taken a role at Setanta College, and it is an absolute blast.
Congratulations.
It's great. I'm technically the academic director there, and they've got a great team there, and Liam heads that team up, and they're doing some really exciting things in terms of education, formal in terms of degrees, master's degrees, but also more informal in terms of short courses. And another guy who's come on board is Des Ryan, who's a protege of Liam's. And Des, we're so fortunate to get him. He set up the academy system that's been really successful at Arsenal Football Club. And I think we were both ready for a change. And we both come on board this year. And Liam is just one of those guys, as you say, Yoda is a very apt term for him. But it's never a kind of aggrandizement. It's never a brag. He just knows so much.
So there's the example. If you think about Yoda, right? Yoda wasn't like, he didn't have posters of himself. He didn't have his own podcast. Yoda just sat in a swamp and waited for his Jedis to come and have a visit. Like, that's literally Liam. He sits in Ireland, in his college, which the Setanta College is becoming like well-known, world renowned for developing performance coaches. But when you think about it, he doesn't do it in a boastful, loud manner. He sits and goes, when you're ready for my education and my team, you're going to find us.
Absolutely. And it's come from such a great background, because what he was head of fitness for Irish rugby for so many years, and he was responsible for putting many of the nuts and bolts, the bricks in place that have sustained the success. Other people have built on it without a doubt, but Liam was the bricklayer who put those systems in place. But what was beautiful about it is that he saw more than the player. He saw the player who, they're interested in strength and conditioning. They make a great potential coach.
Yep.
And out of that is where Setanta grew. So rather than educating the traditional student, the school leaver, he tried to educate the person who, the non-traditional, or maybe the old-fashioned strength and conditioning coach, who came from a background of doing it, garnering the interest, and then educating themselves, which I think is going back to the past. That's where a lot of people of my generation came from.
My colleagues are people who got cut. They made it to like the highest level that they could, and then at some point they just weren't good enough. But they, like, for myself, every sport I played, I made it like almost to the tops, but just under. And every time I got
cut,
that feeling. I know. And I worked my ass off. So I knew like how to turn average into good, but I was never good moving to great. So that process of working my ass off and trying to learn skills that at the time when you and I were playing sports and growing up, we didn't have the education. So it was trial and error. Like, we made mistakes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we can see things working with athletes that a textbook can't show, a course can't show. We experienced what it's like, and we know what it feels like to, not be able to cut left and only cut right. And every time you go to cut left, you get hammered. And every time you cut right, you're running into open air. But you don't know why. And nowadays we can go, oh, well, let's put a sensor on here. Let's measure this, measure that. Okay, well, this glute isn't activating this. But back then it used to be just like, we got to figure this thing out. So Liam is old school. But like I always say, we always got to go back to old school. We go back to the basics. Go back to the fundamentals.
I'll agree with you, but to some extent, I'll disagree with you as well. He's old school. He's new old school.
Oh, yeah,
if that makes any sense, because he'll say, have you seen this new technology? Have you seen this? Have you seen this? Have you seen that? But holding that in place is this deep understanding of performance. So he's old school in that respect. He brings it back to performance, but he's very open to new ideas and new, so
I would hate to use the words old school, new school. I would say it comes down to foundations. He has very solid foundations that he has like kind of vexed out. So he knows exactly how everything fits into something that is concrete.
And that is one of the things I love about Siddhanta's approach, is that it is the balance between the academic theory, but the practical insights as well. And I think sometimes we lose that balance. We become all one or all the other. And where we can combine the two, I think that is the real sweet spot for education. So I'm kind of excited to work with Liam, as you can probably tell.
Yeah. Did you just move there? Like, or are you doing it remotely?
I'm doing it remotely.
Okay.
Which is kind of ironic at this time, because I've not been able to travel.
Right.
We've been stuck to base, but there's so much that you can do now. But I can't wait for things to open up, to be able to go and travel and have those face-to-face meetings.
Yeah,
with
I am as well.
Yes, the virtual technology is great and it's useful, but it's not a direct substitute.
No, my wife is very astute to my emotions, and she's just kind of like, she's like, you need to go, like not for her sake. You need to go because she knows that I need.
Is that you need to go?
Yeah, no. It's not like, hey, get out of here. But it's more. She knows for my mental psychology that I do need to be around people. I'm a social being, and I do need to meet new people and all that kind of stuff, and be in that social setting, like the Perform Better summits, teaching TPI seminars and all that kind of stuff. It's you need those moments. I mean, if we didn't have those moments, I would never have met you. You would have just literally been a YouTube video that I had seen. So.
Absolutely. And you don't make, I think these type of virtual technologies, they're great if you've already met somebody.
Yeah.
And you know somebody. They're not great for that initial meeting. You don't get that feel, that rapport, that, to be able to just bounce conversation off each other.
That's true. Speaking of which, another medium for you to get your information out, now that there's like all this virtual world, there is an old school medium, and I love it. I've actually embraced it more while we've been in this kind of virtual Zoom world. I've embraced the paper book, the reading of actual having my hands on books, because I just feel like I need less screen time, and I need to be in a quiet space where it's just like you and a book. And I gotta say, your new book is unbelievable. You need to share it with the folks. This is a must grab if you're a performance coach, an athlete, or a sports enthusiast. This book will change your life, because we're in our third edition. Are we not? I got the second edition, but you got the third edition coming out?
The third edition should be out now. I think it's due to ship early August, either the end of July or early August, and I'm excited by it. And it's one of those ironies of the lockdown, is that because some activities obviously had to cease, it gave me a little bit of time. I've been trying to work on this for quite a while. I was pleased with the second edition, but as with all things, every time you do a session, every time you coach, every time you think about something, new ideas or new twists on the same thing come out, and I just wanted to get that down. So it's a lot of the exercises are similar. There are a few new ones in, but the whole thing has been restructured. It's a new way of looking at speed and agility training. So
tell people where to find it and how they get it.
It's called Game Speed. It'll be the 3rd edition, and it's published by Coach's Choice out in California. But it should be available once they get the printing and the shipping done. It should be available through most. That sounds like a TV advert. Most good bookstores.
Yes, I love it.
Virtual and real.
So when you do a 3rd edition, I'm just finishing. I'm in the final edit of my book, Dream Big, Over Deliver, Be Undeniable. And it's more of a personal development, brand development, business development for coaches and people of the like. So it's not technical on that manner. But when you do a new version of a book, like a 3rd edition, so you've put new chapters or you've adjusted the content that's in there, do they then have to like pull the 2nd editions out because you don't want to have these two things kind of side by side competing against each other? Like, what happens to the 2nd edition?
What happens to they normally keep them available. I think I guess it's the same as some of these physiology texts. There are
Right.
a few bits that are updated, but the information in the 2nd edition is still pretty good.
Yes.
It's just been reformulated as the 3rd edition. So I'm not 100% sure what they will do.
So for people that have 2nd edition, tell them what the new edition, why they need to get that version of it.
Right. The new edition is very much, it's an expansion on the ideas that were started in the 2nd edition. And where I'm going to now, I'm getting less and less comfortable with the term agility. Not because I think it's necessarily a bad term, but I think people now have preconceptions of what agility is. And I think we've moved beyond the closed open discussion. I think that's kind of done now. Most people think, yeah, you need some kind of open drills in your agility work.
Explain to the listeners just an open and closed drill, just so right. We don't. Yeah,
my apologies. So if we go back 10, 15 years, most agility was run from cone A to cone B, turn at cone B, and run to cone C. That's a closed drill. Everything is pre-planned. You know what direction you're going to running. You know the timings of the changes and so on. And there was a realization, probably the late 2008, 2009, around there, the concept of reactive agility started to come on board, whereby it was noticed that most agility in sport isn't pre-planned.
Right.
You have to, and at that point it was react to various stimuli, and that required a different skill set than the purely physical skill set of the classic closed drill. And that probably was one of the drivers behind the game speed concept originally. But even reactive agility, I think, misses a key component of agility and speed in sport. And I'd argue that the athlete who has to react is probably a poor athlete. The great athlete anticipates.
Yes.
They put themselves in a position that they're starting to dictate the environment to the opposition. So, if we take a football example, if you're a receiver, I'm a cornerback, I don't want to give you a 50-50 split. I want to adjust my body position to close off various options to you. And what I'm doing is, as you move, I'm anticipating, I'm manipulating. My position is not a static position. It is a constant battle between myself and yourself. You're trying to say, right, I don't want him there. I want him over here. I'm going to pull.
Yeah.
And I'm starting to think, well, one, we're not practicing these things. But secondly, our current descriptors of agility aren't describing an awful lot of what happens to a game. So I think we've become hung up on what I call highlight reel agility. So again, if you think of what people, if you describe the term agility to somebody, they're probably going to see a running back making a huge cut and this huge acceleration through a gap for a touchdown. But I think those are the highlight reel moments, specifically because they don't happen that much.
Right.
That's why they make the play of the day. What happened about the linebacker who was able to close that gap? The cornerback who is so good that nobody ever throws that way. All of those skills are lost. So agility to me has become very offensive with some rare game-changing plays. And we're missing so much of the defensive movements and the less obvious offensive movements.
That's so true, because in any sport, I was a running back in college football. And so I was reacting to the environment around me, but I still was the person who made the decision of where I was going to go. Now there is the play. So that's the plan. Then there is react to the environment. And then the last bit that makes people great is the predictive, I call it. So it's like the plan, react, and predict. And I always thought, even though I was playing a different sport than hockey, I always thought back to Wayne Gretzky. And Wayne Gretzky he wasn't the best athlete. He wasn't the fastest. He wasn't the most agile. He used to say, I just go where I predict the puck will be, not where the puck is. I go to where the puck will be. And that's how he, it looked like he was moving so fast and getting into these crazy spots, but he was just basically going, where would I position myself if the puck comes around the net, so I'm in a good position? So I used to think of myself that way. I was like, can I predict where can I put myself so that the environment might be conducive for me to have success here? And
absolutely.
I use that same analogy.
You see what you're doing there, and my guess is if you think when we break things down for agility, we always look at the speed at which. So we'll always time something. But and you've alluded it to there, not every athlete who is the greatest on paper on the tests is the greatest in the game. Something is happening. There is some differential between our testing and our performance. Don't get me wrong, some are just standouts and it transfers, but not all.
No. Well,
now my guess is as you run a sweep, are you running full speed straight out?
No.
You're waiting.
Yeah.
You're making a move. You're trying to say, right, can I take the linebacker that way?
Yeah. Can I create?
So you're manipulating. Now then at some point you may make that cut and go.
Right.
But all we ever measure is the speed of the whole thing.
Yeah.
And we're missing so many key points of what you've done to set that play up.
I think the problem with that, though, is it's so hard to simulate what we just said.
It is.
Like coaches want a drill that's repeatable. They want something that is predictable, especially if you're going to test for it. So if you had like, they don't like to use humans because humans will make mistakes. So they'd like to have like a gate, if you will, and the gate's moving laterally, and all of a sudden one of the gate panels would fall and you'd have to quickly react and run through the gate panel. That would be an unbelievable piece of technology, but it would take up a lot of space. It would cost a fortune, and it would only take care of that one move, the sweep. And then you're like, well, what about the dive play? Well, we got to create a new.
Totally agree with you. So what I try to do is to break that sweep down. So what I'll see is that you are on probably a curved controlled run.
Yeah.
So you need to be able to do that. Then you've got a cut, and then you've got an acceleration from a cut. Now, suddenly I've got 3 skills that I can develop that then can be pieced together, just like a dance move, that become so many different things on the field. So quite often what you'll see is the absolute stud running back, but everything is absolutely top speed. They don't have that ability to slow down.
Mm-hmm.
to switch from high speed to lower speed, to get in the position to make that cut. And that's what, to me, game speed is we start with the context of the game. We look at the various phases of the game, and then we look at what does a running back have to do? What does a linebacker have to do? What does a cornerback have to do? A safety have to do? You know, in soccer, which is more the game I will work with, what does a center back have to do? And then figuring out what movement capacities do they need to have to be able to do those tasks well. And interestingly, in so many of them, it's simply being in a good position so that your first step is clean. Because in so many sports, if you can win that first step, it opens opportunities up.
Well, my old lacrosse coach, Don Fleming, he field lacrosse, a lot of open field running. It's very similar to soccer in that way. It's like a mixture between football and soccer in a sense, or rugby. But there's a lot of open field running, and I was quite fit and fast. So I would just think, if I just go all out, I'm going to have success. And I remember him taking me aside and saying, Jason, you don't need to run full out when you have the ball constantly. He said, it's actually not how fast you run. It's the change in pace is causing the defense to have to react to your change of pace. So if you can actually slow down and they pick their line to intersect with you, and now you accelerate, now their line is not, going to intersect with you anymore. So, but if you run full speed, it's really easy to get a gauge on, how to stop you. So there's an example of agility where we're in literally running in a straight line, but gauging speed, changing speed, changing.
You see how often when people do sprints, do they slow down?
Right.
We don't practice it. We don't practice taking speed off.
Yep.
We always associate agility, or too often, with change of direction, not necessarily change of speed.
Right.
But so I'll instigate practices where we control that speed. We go from fast to fastest, fast to slower. Again, things that we're not necessarily practicing doing, but you would know as a defender, oh my God, what I want, if somebody was ever marking, what the hell is he going to do now? If I can get to that situation where my opponent is thinking, I don't know what's coming, I have an advantage. If my only tool, as your coach said, is that top speed, once I come up against somebody who can match my top speed, suddenly I call it game speed fitness. I don't have a lot because I've got no tools that I can go up against this better athlete. But if I've got that ability to control that speed, to just curve my patterns, to shift, just a little shift in my shoulders that suggest I'm going there, and then I go out.
Yeah.
And so really what it's about is trying to get a grip of sports, not necessarily from a purely scientific perspective, but from the coach's perspective, from the athlete's perspective. What's difficult to play against? Because I think in speed and agility, especially in the context of the game, we throw away so much information as anecdotal. But if I wanted to know how to play receiver, what should I do? Should I go to a few scientific studies, or do I go and talk to Jerry Rice?
Or go talk to, like you said earlier, even better, talk to Sherman, like a great cornerback, and then say, who are the hardest guys to cover and why?
And why?
Yeah.
So but we don't. You see, I think we've become so reliant on the scientific method that we'll say, but there's no evidence to support that. That conversation with Sherman or with Jerry Rice is to me the gold mine that we're not digging. And that's what the book tries to do, is it tries to explore those lesser known parts, those lesser considered parts, and and try to have ways and means by which we can train those.
It's amazing. And I'm not going to put myself in your group, but if I go, like if I sat down with you, Liam Hennessy, Al Vermeil, let's say Dan John, or like whoever it happens to be, like some of the great minds of strength conditioning and movement. If we talk about how we would structure drills, or I watched you coach, the funny thing is that from the outsider would see us coaching and go, "Oh, they're not doing anything special. I didn't see any drills that I've never seen before. I never seen anything like that blew me away." Oh, you see, the real depth comes from the simplicity of what you just said earlier, like doing a run drill where you're sprinting and then slowing down, and then doing a slow run and then speed up. People would watch that from the outside and go, "What are these guys doing? I thought these guys were the best in the world. These are the best coaches in the world, and they're just having them run at different speeds." Because here's the deal. Each of the great coaches that we've met and dealt with, the foundation, again, is like rich with a purpose, an intent, and we deliver it in a simple fashion, but we know where those layers fit on top of each other. We know the end goal. And to the layman watching might go, "Well, Jay, all he did was teach them like a proper deadlift technique and a single leg squat. And then he did this weird 180 jump. Like the 180 jump, that was cool. But the rest of it just seemed like I mean, every coach does that." Oh, but you don't know where we are in our progression. You don't know what our end goal is. You don't know what my challenges of my athlete are. You know what I'm saying? Then you go into a gym and someone's doing crazy things and they go, "That's an amazing coach." And I go, "That player will be injured or burnt out in a month."
You're absolutely right. Before you can evaluate anything people do, you have to know what's come before. You have to know where that journey is going to, where they are on that journey. And again, it's never about exercises.
No.
It's always about purpose, understanding why it's in there and what its key objective is. And again, I would agree with you. If you watch me coach, there isn't that much that's exceptionally different in there. There are a few things I think I work on that a lot of people don't, but they're not, these mind-blowing drills, but you know what you're looking for.
But that's why your book is so important, because the book is not the exercise. The book is the philosophy behind the exercise, which makes the exercise make sense. And that's the important thing.
And that's why I consider it as a system, as much as anything else. There is a purpose. So I can take a movement such as a cut, and I can have an exercise that introduces it, an exercise that develops it, an exercise that makes it contextual for different sports, and different athletes are going to be at different parts of the journey at different times. Yeah. But you can just pick and say, right, this is what we need. This is what we need today. But it's interesting that we're not using that information source of coaches and athletes in what we do. And knowing, right, what does Ronaldo do? What does Messi do? And if you watch the way they just manipulate their torso, for example. So if I run at you and I just manipulate my torso now, you don't know which way my legs are facing, but you think I'm running that way. And if I can suddenly switch back out of it, if I've switched your focus, then I've manipulated the environment to suit myself.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And these are all the little nuggets that you're going to get in your book. I highly recommend everybody go find it. But we're also encouraging everybody to come out on August 12th to the Perform Better. What do we call it? Is it this? It's not the summit. It's
not
the meeting of the minds.
I'm not too,
yeah, we're debating. We're going to have John Graham on it, and
is Bill Parisi?
Yeah, Bill Parisi. I mean, these are the legends of speed development. So you have you and me really probably talking more about I mean, I can only predict that we're going to be more about the holistic aspect of movement, because the nuts and bolts in a debate and conversation, it's very tough to talk about exercise. And like we said, it's not about the exercise. It's about the philosophy.
I think it'll be as much about philosophies, overall methodologies, the type of objectives that we have, the way we see speed and agility training, where it fits in.
Absolutely.
It should be exciting.
It's going to be great. It's going to be fantastic. I can't wait. And what's nice is I didn't have to build a slideshow for this. So, I spend so much time on my slideshows. It's incredible. So when we finish these podcasts, I always say dream big, over deliver, and be undeniable. The dream big is having a dream that's so big that if it came true, like the hair on your arms would stand up. Over deliver is once you reach that goal, now you have to over deliver on it and make it bigger than you even dreamed it possible. And lastly is being undeniable, so that when you're on the journey towards it and you meet an obstacle, you find a way around it. Of those three things, can you share with our listeners maybe a little antidote or a little thing that you experienced in your life where you either had to overcome an obstacle to get to where you are today? Maybe you achieved a dream that you put out, and at the time it seemed really scary, but you made it happen. Or maybe just a philosophy of over delivering, and some examples of how you over delivered and had success through that.
It's a long. That's a big question. That's a big question.
I know it is. I know it is. That's why I throw it at the end.
I would guess. I don't think I've had singular moments. I think it's been more of a journey I've been on. So if I think back, I was this sports mad kid. If you'd have told me I could have a career in sport, I would have thought you're mad. It just didn't exist. Rugby, which is the game I played, was semi-professional at that point. So you had to have a job. So there was no way I could become, that was going to be my career. It ended up, I played a couple of years as when the rugby went professional, but I always had jobs backing it up. But slowly but surely, I got into training. So I loved rugby, but I got into this weird stuff, lifting weights, sprinting. Didn't know what the hell it was called in those days. People thought I was rather strange. Why are you lifting weights? Which for a rugby player now, people don't even think twice, but it was seen as kind of strange back then. And part of my passion was always, can I share this? It's making a difference for me. Can I share it with other people? Mm-hmm. So I started to coach. So I was coaching at the same time as I was playing. When I eventually retired, I said, I'm going to give, now I live in a real small rural area of Wales where it's a small town. We don't have massive opportunities. I wanted to give what I call our kids the opportunity to train. So I set up I got a job at a local college. I set up a sports academy there. And the typical day was they would come in, they would train physically for an hour, they would do all their studies, and they would do their team practice at the end. And it worked. It was really, really good. I learned a huge amount, as you can imagine. You're coaching every day. You're seeing what works, what doesn't work. And then when I look back, I've had a career in sport. Yeah. But I can't think of, I then went on to university and I've managed to teach this stuff. I've coached, as I said, at the national level and so on. But I can't think of one clearly defining moment. It was just this, I'm going to do something with this. But it is taking risks, I think sometimes. And you've got to step out and say, I'm going to try this.
I would say this, though, and I talk about this in my mentorship when I'm mentoring young coaches. It's all about intent and it's all about purpose. So if you had like a passion for fitness and you had a passion for sport, your intent, your energy that you put out every single day when you woke up was towards sport. and you didn't know the end journey. You didn't know the destination, but you did know that you were passionate about sport, and there was no way that it was not going to be a part of your life. So your daily actions started to accumulate into something that, you know, started to take some speed and take some ground. And you naturally being a coach and then transitioning into a performance coach makes sense. But what I try and do to young professionals now through my mentorship is let's really dissect what your drivers are, like what drives you towards taking actions that you do in a daily way. Let's find out now, while you're young, what are the things that you find important? What are the currencies that you want to be paid in? Because it's not just going to be money. You're going to be paid in fame. You're going to be paid in, you know, freedom of your time. You're going to be paid in security, all these different things. Let's find out what are important ones to you. And then let's design an end destination that, not to get to the destination, but knowing that the journey towards it is going to be worth the journey. And in doing that, what we do is we set these people off on a journey that can't fail. They might not ever reach that destination, but they are going to be walking through that journey with intent, and it's going to match their purpose. Yeah.
And probably, if I could sum up, I think you used a word there that probably sums up my journey. I designed it step by step. I had no grand plan.
Yep.
But you know, I played high-level rugby for 15 years. I wanted a coach. So when I got a job ostensibly teaching, I thought, right, I am now going to build this around strength and conditioning, because to me, the best way to learn about sports science is to actually do it.
Yeah.
When I got to university, there was no strength and conditioning set up there. That was part of my mission. I'm going to design this in the way I want it to be. And so I think sometimes career-wise, we look for jobs, we look for roles that already exist. I think sometimes we have to create those.
Yes. I love that. I don't think there's a better way to finish this podcast. I want people to digest that. You don't always have to follow pre-existing roles.
No.
You don't have to do that. Many times, if you really want to truly have like self joy, you really have to create it yourself. You have to create your own role.
And sometimes you have to go out on a limb. So as I said, I was doing weights when I, you know, early 80s, late 70s, early 80s. I got some weird looks from the rugby fraternity.
I always get weird looks.
When I said I was going to set up a sports academy, I had some real weird looks. Because people, no, nobody does that. I said, yeah, we do.
Yep.
So I think something you create, you design, and you give a little bit of yourself, and you put your stamp on what you do.
Ian, I can't thank you enough for being on the show. This is not the last time, by the way. Next time we'll do it in person.
Absolute pleasure. Yes, now that would be nice.
We'll have a pint.
That would be lovely.
Have a chat and put it on wax. So we always finish these podcasts again. Dream big, over deliver, be undeniable. And I say, cheers, everybody. And you say,
if you're done.
Sure. That sounds great.
There we are. It's just a Welsh cheers.
There you go. It's a Welsh cheers.
It's a Welsh cheers. There
cheers,
you go.
buddy.
And now I can see that the British is coming. You said I'll have a pint. Normally Americans and Canadians would say we'll have a beer. But you're starting to get the lingo.
No, my parents are English. My parents were English, and my back. We got the whole British Isles there. I think the Glass family, they got around.
Cheers,
good,
my man.
All right, cheers, buddy.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Cheers, guys. Bye-bye.
Welcome to the next level.